Okay, hey guys, so today we are going to talk about cropping patterns. So, cropping pattern is nothing but the proportion of area under different crops at any given point of time in a unit area. So, it indicates both temporal as well as spatial arrangement of the crops in a particular area. Now, what do you mean by temporal arrangements? So, temporal arrangements is nothing but it's the yearly sequence of growing different crops on one piece of land, on a given piece of land. For example, if only one crop is grown on a particular land year after year, like for example, if rice is grown year after year, then it is called monocropping. Now, let's talk about spatial arrangements. What is spatial arrangement? It is the arrangement of crops on a piece of land. So, for example, if two crops are grown on a land in alternative rows, then it is called row intercropping. Okay, now we'll talk about the cropping systems. Now, these cropping systems they include the sum total of all the crops and practices we used to grow those crops on a field of farm. Like for example, water, soil, technique, technology, etc., which is needed. Now, what is the difference between cropping pattern and cropping system? Cropping pattern is it includes crop rotation practiced in a given area, while cropping system it includes cropping pattern and its management to derive the benefits from the given resource under the given environmental conditions. Now, what is the significance of this cropping system? Firstly, it maintains and enhances soil fertility. For example, growing the leguminous crops, they enrich nitrogen, and growing perennial forages or some millets, they help enhance the soil organic content. Now, the second important point is it minimizes the spread of diseases. How? Because it encourages biodiversity and it provides home or a habitat to a variety of insects, and they may act as predator for certain diseases and thus limit the outbreak of diseases. The third point, the cropping system inhibits pest and insect growth. It reduces the homogeneity of the farm. The heterogeneity increases the barriers against the biological dispersal of pests in the field. Now, what is the control? And this cropping system also controls weed. How? Because it reduces the likelihood that specific weed species they might become adopted to the system and they might become problematic. So the cropping systems it reduces this likelihood. For example, by rotation of crops, it is effective for maintaining or keeping the land free of weeds. Now, this cropping system it uses resources more efficiently. How multiple activities, if scientifically planned, they lead to better usage of resources. For example, fodder crops can be used for livestock feed, animal dung it can be used as organic manure, and dairy products they help to enhance farmers' income. And cropping system also reduces risk for crop failure. Why? Because different crops have different response to climate vagaries and varied degree of susceptibility to disease attack. And cropping system it improves food and financial security. How? By reducing the risk of crop failure and then diversifying the income opportunities. It does so. Now let's talk about crop diversification. What do you mean by crop diversification? It means addition of new crops or cropping systems to agricultural production on a particular farm, taking into account the different returns from the value-added crops along with complementary marketing opportunities. Now, what are the factors that are affecting the cropping pattern? In 1990, World Bank it put forward a detailed list of factors. There are three types of factors. One is the agronomic or the technical factors, the other one is the economic factors, and the third one is the government policy. Now, under agronomic or technical factors, what are the factors? They are climate and soil type, that is irrigation, topography, fertility, drainage. Second one is availability of required inputs. that is fertilizer, chemical credit, tractors, etc. Third one is plant or seed of high genetic quality. Fourth one is management techniques and quality managers. Fifth one is the abundance of labor. Now, talking about the economic factors, the first factor is the flow of market signals and communication and info systems. For example, regarding prices in market, supply, demand, etc. Second is the venture capital and entrepreneurship. Third is the transport of input and output prices. Fourth is the info on export standards, market demand, and relative profitability. Fifth is the efficient marketing systems. The next factor is the government policy. Under the government policy, the first factor is non-distortionary policy to avoid discrimination among crops by example, MSP policy. And the next one is the efficient research and extension programs without any bias for major crops or against high value crops. Third is the contract farming opportunities. Fourth is rural credit. Fifth is off-farm employment opportunities. Sixth is marketing systems including quality standards. Sixth is the involvement of private sector. Now, let's talk about the types of cropping systems. The first one is monocropping. What do you mean by monocropping? Monocropping is nothing but growing of only one crop on a piece of land year after year. It could be due to the climatic and socio-economic conditions or due to the specialization of that particular farmer in growing that particular crop. For example, groundnut or cotton or sorghum, they are grown year after year due to limitation of rainfall. While in the canal irrigated areas or in waterlogged areas, you see rice crop is grown. And it's not possible to grow any other crops. That's why there monocropping is practiced. Now, we are done with monocropping. Now, multiple cropping. Multiple cropping means growing two or more crops in the same field within a given year. It is the intensification. It is the intensification of cropping in time and space dimensions. That is more number of crops within the year and more number of crops on the same piece of land in any given period. It includes mixed cropping, intercropping, and sequence cropping. Now, what do you mean by cropping intensity? Cropping intensity is the number of crops cultivated in a piece of land per annum. That is, cropping intensity is equal to gross cropped area by net sown area into 100. Gross cropped area is the total area sown once as well as more than once in a particular area. When the crop is sown on a piece of land for twice, area is counted twice in gross cropped area. On the other hand, the net sown area is the area sown with crops but is counted only once. Now, in Punjab and Tamil Nadu, this cropping intensity is more than 100%, while in Rajasthan, this cropping intensity is less. Now, what is the need for intensive cropping? Firstly, increase in population has put pressure on land to increase the productivity per unit area, unit time, and per unit resource used. And for efficient use of available natural resources, cropping system has to evolve with change in climate, soil, and water availability. Now, let's talk about mixed cropping. What do you mean by mixed cropping? Two or more crops grown in the same field within a given year without a definite row arrangement. Common practice, this is the common practice in most of the dryland areas. Seeds of different crops are mixed in certain proportion and they are sown. Now, what is the objective? The objective is to meet the family requirement of cereals, pulses, and veggies. Example, sorghum, pearl millet, cowpea are mixed and broadcasted in rain-fed conditions. Now we'll talk about intercropping. What do you mean by intercropping? It includes growing two or more crops simultaneously with definite row arrangement on the same field. It is earlier practiced as insurance against crop failure under poor rainfall conditions. But if it is done unscientifically, then it might lead to intercrop competition for available resources. Now, what is the requirement for successful intercropping? Firstly, the timing of peak nutrient demands of component crops, they shouldn't overlap at all. And then the competition for light also should be very minimum among the component crops. and the difference in maturity of the component crop should be at least 30 days. Now, what are the types of intercropping? First is the row intercropping. What do you mean by row intercropping? It is growing two or more crops simultaneously where one or more crops are planted in a row, a variation in space dimension. For example, maize plus green gram or maize plus black gram or groundnut plus red gram. Now, variations include alley cropping where crops are grown in between rows of trees and strip cropping where multiple rows or a strip of one crop are alternated with multiple rows of another crop. Now, what do you mean by strip intercropping? Now, two or more plants are planted in the same field in alternate strips. And these strips, they are wide enough to permit independent cultivation but narrow enough for crops to interact. For example, groundnut plus red gram strip. That is 6 is to 4. You do it in 6 is to 4. What are the advantages of this intercropping? First advantage is better use of growth resources, including light, nutrients, and water. And it also encourages biodiversity, thereby providing home or a habitat to variety of insects, and which can in turn help limit the outbreaks of crop pests by increasing predator biodiversity. It causes yield stability. Even if one crop fails, the other crop will yield and it gives income. And next, it reduces pest and disease incidences and improves soil health and agroecological system, and it increases the barriers against biological dispersal of pest organisms through crop. Now, what are the differences between mixed cropping and intercropping? Mixed cropping, you do mixed cropping to minimize the risk of crop failure, but you do intercropping to increase productivity from a unit area. And in mixed cropping, seeds of different crops are mixed together before sowing, while in intercropping, seeds are not mixed. In mixed cropping, all crops are sown at the same time, while in intercropping, crops can be sown at the same or at different times. In mixed cropping, crop sowing is very random. In intercropping, different crops are grouped in different rows or columns. In mixed cropping, pest control is relatively different. And in intercropping, pest control is relatively easier. Pest control is difficult in mixed cropping, while pest control is easier in intercropping. In mixed cropping, equal emphasis is given to all the crops, while in intercropping, more emphasis is given to main crops. In mixed cropping, same fertilizer and pesticide is applied to all the crops, while in intercropping, specific fertilizer and pesticide is applied to each crop. Now, sequence cropping or sequential cropping or crop rotation. What do you mean by this? This is nothing but growing two or more crops in a sequence on the same piece of land in a farming year. Succeeding crop is planted after the preceding crop has been harvested. This is sequence cropping or sequential cropping or crop rotation. Now, this crop variation it is done with respect to only time. So, there is no intercrop competition. Now, in this, the various types are double cropping. What do you mean by double cropping? Double cropping is growing two crops on the same land in a year in a sequence across time. Example, growing cotton after rice. Triple cropping. What is triple cropping? Growing three on same land in a year in sequence. For example, grow rice, and then again grow rice, and then grow pulses. Quadruple. What is quadruple cropping? Growing four crops on the same land in a year in sequence. Example, first growing tomato, next growing ridge gourd, next growing amaranthus grains, and next growing baby corn. Now, what are the other types of multiple cropping? The first type of multiple cropping is alley cropping. What is alley cropping? Planting rows of trees at wide spacing with a companion crop grown in alleyways that between the rows. So what it does, it diversifies source of farm income, it improves crop production, and it provides protection and conservation benefits to crops. Example, wheat, corn, soya beans, or hay planted in between rows of black walnut or pecan, which is a type of walnut tree. Relay cropping. What is relay cropping? Growing two or more crops simultaneously during part of life cycle of each. That is, second crop is planted after the first crop has reached its reproductive stage of growth, but before it is ready for harvest. Example, rice fallow pulses. That is, pulses are grown on the land where rice is nearing its harvest season. It allows farmers to grow two crops in one season in places where growing season isn't long enough to accommodate two crops. And the next type is the raccoon cropping. What do you mean by raccoon cropping? In this, It is a method of harvesting a crop which leaves roots and lower parts of the plant uncut to give the ratoon or the stubble crop. This crop it regrows out of roots or stalks after the harvest of crops. The main benefit of this is that the crop matures earlier in the season, and so it also decreases the cost of preparing the field and planting. This method can be used endlessly as the yield of ratoon crop decreases after each cycle. Most often, it is used with crops which are known to give a steady yield for 3 years under most conditions. Example like sugarcane, banana, pineapple, etc. Now, cropping system in India. So, evolution. In India, over the last 50 years, this trend in land use pattern and cropping pattern, it has shown that increasing use of land for purpose of cultivation with slight variations. So the main observable trends or issues in Indian agriculture system are firstly the dominance of food crops over non-food crops. At the time of independence, over 80% of gross crop India was under food crops production. But gradually, with the commercialization of agriculture, farmers have started shifting area to non-food crops due to relatively better price realization. The second issue is the variety of crops. Horticulture crop production recently overtaken the total food grain production in India. Horticulture crop production is 305.4 million tons in 2017-18, while the total food grain production is 279.5 million tons. That is, horticulture production is overtaking the food grain production. Plantation crops are also highly profitable, but the problem is they require huge capital in large tracts of land. So it is only confined to very limited parts of the country. Emphasis is placed now on the production of oilseeds through various initiatives like integrated scheme of oilseed, pulses, maize, and oil palm, etc. Now, what is the reason after ensuring food security? Now, the policy emphasis is on increasing farmers' income, boost exports, save foreign exchange spent on import of edible oils. Another issue is the dominance of cereals among food crops. Now, the cereals like wheat and rice, they dominate. About 82% of the area under food crops has been put to cultivation of cereals. What is the reason? Reason is this is due to the better prices, less risk in production, and availability of better seeds. Another issue is the decline in core cereals like jowar, bajra, maize, millets, barley, etc. These are called core cereals or inferior cereals. Area under these crops to the total area under cereal crops, it declined from 48% during independence, that is 1952 to 25% now in 2016. What is the reason? Reason is due to the spread of good irrigation facility, improved inputs, and a shift in consumption patterns of people. Another issue is the declining importance of kharif crops. Share of the kharif crops has decreased from 71% in 1970s to 49% in 2015 to 16. Now, the share of Rabi food grain production in total food grain production increased from 36.4% in 1970 to 71 to 50.83% in 2015 to 2016. What is the reason? Reason is the kharif crops are not reliable because they are mostly dependent on monsoon rainfall, which in itself is unreliable. Contrary to this, mostly rabi crops in India are raised on irrigation, which offers a degree of reliability. Now, we'll talk about the categories of crops in India. Crops they can be categorized differently based on end usage and on growing season. Food crops. Food crops are crops which are grown as food for producers' family or for producers' own livestock. For example, wheat, rice, jowar, etc. The scale of operations is quite small so as to fulfill the basic needs of a family. Now the cash crops. These are used for profit rather than consumption by families. They can be consumed directly or processed into other products like sugar and biofuel. Consists of foods. It also consists of foods like tobacco, tea, coffee, cardamom, fruits and vegetables, grains, etc. They are sold, but some aren't edible. For example, cotton, tobacco, they are non-edible cash crops. Now, plantation crops. Plantation is a large scale farm that specializes in cash crops. It is usually cultivated as a single crop on an extensive scale in a large contiguous area owned and managed by an individual or a company. High value commercial crops. Crops including tea, coffee, rubber, cocoa, coconut, areca nut, oil palm, cashew, cinchona, etc. Now we talk about the horticulture crops. Now, science, horticulture is nothing but the science and the art of growing and caring for plants, especially flowers, fruits, and vegetables. It comes from the Latin word and it means garden cultivation. While agronomy refers to growing of field crops, horticulture refers to small scale gardens. All remember, all food crops can be cash crops, but not all cash crops can be food crops. Food crops can be eaten by someone somewhere and so they have a cash value. Now, you can also classify the crops based on the season. So, three seasons, mainly Kharif, Rabi, and Zaid. Kharif. This Kharif coincides with the southwest monsoon and it corresponds to rainy season. Rabi. Rabi begins with the onset of winter in October to November and ends in March to April. Low temperature facilitates the cultivation of the temperate and subtropical crops like wheat, gram, and mustard. Zaid. Short duration summer cropping season between the harvesting of Rabi crops and sowing of Kharif crops. So cultivation of watermelons, cucumbers, vegetables, and fodder crops during the season is done on irrigated land. However, this distinction does not exist in southern parts of the country. Here, temperature is high enough to grow tropical crops during any period, provided soil moisture is available. Same crop can be grown three times in an agricultural year. Major crops which are cultivated. So, in the Kharif crop season, in the northern states, rice, cotton, bajra, maize, jowar, and tur. In the southern states, rice, maize, ragi, jowar, groundnut. During the Rabi season, which is in October to March, in the northern states, wheat, gram, rapeseed, and mustard, barley. In the southern states, rice, maize, ragi, groundnut, and jowar. In the Zaid cropping season in the northern states, vegetables, fruits, fodder. In the southern states, rice, vegetables, fodder. So, cropping patterns in India. Crop diversification and intensification. It depends on soil and climatic patterns, resource, which covers irrigation, rainfall, and soil fertility, technology, that is varieties of seeds, cultural requirements, mechanization, plant protection, and access to infrastructure facilities, irrigation, transport, storage, trade and marketing, post-harvest handling and processing, etc. Condition of household, food and fodder self-sufficiency requirements and investment capacity, socio-economic conditions, financial resource-based land ownership, size and type of land holdings, household use of food, fodder, fuel, fiber and finance, labor availability, etc. Pricing structure includes output and input risk prices and trade policies and other economic policies that affect prices directly or indirectly. Now we'll talk about the institutions. Uh, I think this video has become too long. Yes, so we'll continue this in next video. Bye.